Welcome to the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast with Ron and Kristin, where leadership meets entertainment. This podcast features stories with names and certain aspects that have been changed to keep submissions private. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast, where leadership meets entertainment. In this episode, we will be discussing gossip in the workplace. Is it good or bad? Before we begin, like, rate, and please tell somebody about the podcast. And here's an easy way to do it. Go to your favorite episode, copy the link, and text it to someone. We appreciate you guys. Ron, how's it going?
It's going great. We are busy, as you know, but that's exciting. So, Kristin, you know this, but I'll share this with the audience. I went back to the academy at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center on Thursday. I had not been back since I retired. And I retired during the COVID, lockdowns and things like that. So it was just weird. And I felt like I needed that closure.
Yeah.
But it was so good to see some of my former coworkers and people from the other agencies. It was so cool. I got to catch up on some juicy gossip. I had to throw that in because of the...
Yeah.
No, I was just reminded about, life is about relationships. And
Absolutely.
gosh, it was just so good. I had the best day I'd had in a long time. So good stuff.
Yeah. I love that. And I like hearing about that because to your point, it's about relationships, and relationships open doors. And I love that you were able to get that closure that you needed, because I understand how it is similar to what I dealt with, I went from working in the office every day to working remote, and you really lose that sense of team. And so it's really nice to be able to get back, and even if it's just grabbing dinner with a former colleague or employee.
I was going to ask you if you ever run into anyone or talk to any of your former colleagues.
Yeah, I definitely do. Some of my best friends, we used to work together. We were peers. And I've stayed in contact with a lot of the leaders that I've worked for, and we still have great relationships. So I don't necessarily just run into them. We don't really live in the same town, but it's like more of an organized meetup, and it's wonderful to do that.
It's good stuff.
Yeah,
Good
absolutely.
stuff.
Now, I know we're talking about gossip today. And in the beginning, I said good or bad. Most people are going to assume gossip is a negative thing. And generally speaking, it is. We'll dive into that. But I know you have a specific chapter dedicated to gossip in the workplace, or gossip in general. What caused you to add that chapter?
Yeah, Kristin, that's a great question. And I did feel it was that important. Everywhere I worked, from the time I worked at Lowe's when I was probably 19, of course it happened in college, and then when I was a cop and probation and all that, there was always gossip. And frankly, early in my career, I kind of enjoyed it. I'm not going to lie. So I had a situation happen that I'm not going to delve into that. People can get the book, or people may have already read that. But I got caught up in this little gossip chain. So I thought it was important, because part of my book is to help up and coming leaders, new leaders, help them make good decisions. And that is definitely something that happens in every single workplace. So I'll explain a little bit more about that later, what I put in the book as we progress.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to hearing it. I've read your book, but I also would love a refresher on that chapter.
Yeah.
So let's unpack some more about gossip. So as I mentioned earlier, the title is Gossip in the Workplace, Good or Bad. Again, you're probably wondering how there could be anything good about gossip. Stay with us. We'll explain that. So when a work setting consists of at least 3 people, it seems that gossip will occur at some point. But what do we mean by gossip? So likely everyone has their own take on what constitutes gossip, and assumes that everyone else is thinking the same way. One definition that seems useful, even if a little strict, is talking about someone in a way that could be taken as negative or disparaging, and that person is not present, or at least unaware of the comments. So that definition casts a light that likely reveals more experiences of gossip that we might have initially estimated. So what's the big deal?
So, as defined here, this is the problem with gossip. The person that's being talked about is not there to defend themselves or to maybe provide an explanation. As you know, did you play the old telephone game,
Oh,
Kristen?
yeah. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
you whisper in,
Classic.
you whisper in someone's ear,
Yeah.
and then by the time you get to the end of the line, it says something
Oh, completely different.
completely different.
Yeah.
I think you had one when we were talking offline. What was it,
Yeah.
Edward?
Yeah. It can start out with like Edward bought blueberries at the grocery store to Edward had blue balls in Vegas, right? It's like it can really take a turn.
Oh, and another problem is a lot of times some of the gossip, they may not even know the person that well. They
Yeah.
don't know their personality or anything. So, yeah, that is a kind of a negative. Another potential problem with gossip is that venting a frustration or other negative emotions experienced by the gossipers may decrease the motivation to address the relevant issues with the targeted gossip. What does that mean? That means you talk about it so much, everyone just keeps talking about it, but no one actually goes to that person to address the conduct. Or maybe
Mhm.
they don't even go to management or whatever. You want things to get better, but sometimes people just like to gossip about it.
Yeah.
Uh,
They love it.
y-
They
y-
salivate for it.
yeah. The other thing is some people just typically agree without even wanting any more facts. It sounds good, it sounds reasonable, so they will just go right along. And again, nothing ever happens.
Mhm. Yeah. It's really interesting, Ron. I feel like the people that gossip generally don't have a lot going on personally, and so they're going to just look for any information that might not be known by the majority of folks so that they can feel special and have this bit of information and that separates them from the rest, right? And that's what I found in my career and just even in personal lives as well. And the person that wants that, generally, I'm not going to feed them at all. I'm not going to give them anything. I'm going to actually do the opposite and really pull back from them. I don't know how you've handled them in the past.
Well, as I told you, Kristen, I'm not spotless on this issue. There was a time in my life I didn't see the danger. I can remember in high school when you would, make out with a girl. The guys, they called it locker room talk. So the guys
Hmm.
would brag about it, and I got caught up in that a little bit. So I had to mature, and I agree with you. People who are gossip, to a large extent, may not have anything going on. I had a lot going on, but it was fun. But we're going to get to that. We're
Well,
going to get to that.
I want to throw you a bone here. The locker room is one thing. That's one thing, right? I mean, come on. I was doing it too in my teens and early 20s, right? But when you have adults in the workplace, they should really be beyond this piece, or at least it might take a while to realize what's happening and that you're feeding someone who just loves that gossip, right? So then there's the risk of gossiping that might tarnish the reputation of the gossiper. And it almost always does. I mean, on the surface, gossip seems to serve the function of directing attention away from the gossiper and their behavior or work performance. However, the phenomenon known in psychology as the self-serving bias, the tendency we all have to give ourselves the benefit of the doubt and view ourselves generally more positively than an objective assessment would warrant. So there's some interesting pieces here. We're peeling back the layers. So if we gossip about some behavior or trait that we ourselves exhibit, yet do not recognize or underestimate in ourselves, listeners may see hypocrisy. Basically, do as I say, not as I do.
That is, some people call it projecting, but
Right.
people
Absolutely.
people will literally be engaging in the same behavior but gossip about someone else.
Yes.
That's a
And
little crazy.
it takes you aback for sure. Like,
Yeah.
really? Are you serious right now? Or is this satire? Another well-documented phenomenon in psychology is the false consensus effect, where we tend to assume or overestimate that others view things the same way we do. So our gossipy commentary may seem to us like simply relaying self-evident truth, but if listeners do not see it the same way, they may come to view us negatively and, of course, not explicitly reveal it. So for more information, just watch the news, right?
Fake news.
Exactly. So why is gossip so common?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's not a
It is.
stretch to think that although remote work has its benefits, people are lonely. Now, we've had gossip since the beginning of time, but there are some people who believe that the remote work aspect, like you said, people don't have anything going on, they don't have the connection, so the gossip is fun. They
Yeah.
call someone and they begin to gossip, and they're more curious. Like, I wonder what's going on at the office because they don't have that day-to-day contact. So in that, I guess, scenario, you can understand that people want to spice up the workday a little bit. As
Right,
a
right.
matter of fact, now this stunned me, Kristen, as you know, in the research of this. According to the BBC, and there were 2 or 3 other studies, there's another one in our show notes, gossip has benefits. One potential benefit is that gossip provides a means for individuals to bond and build trust through sharing of these semi-secret judgments.
Mm,
Now, let's be honest, and we try to be very factual on this
yeah.
podcast. We're human. And it does feel good that you and your friend, like I had a friend, we could just look each other and know we were making fun of someone else or
Right,
whatever it
right.
is. Like there's a bonding aspect to it.
Yeah.
The problem is that even though there is a benefit, many times, as you mentioned earlier, we become disrespected. If you're a person that does this a lot, it can have benefits, it can bond you and a few other people, but it also gets them suspicious, wondering, are you gossiping about them? Or ultimately you're disrespected. So it's just a fine line. And we're not saying that you're going to quit gossiping because of this. We hope that you will reduce it a little bit because we think it'll be good for your leadership and your career. But just know this, people who gossip a lot ultimately are not respected and they are seen
Yeah.
as insecure. Now, you mentioned earlier, Kristen, about me putting a chapter on gossip in my
Mm-hmm.
book. And I use this also in my leadership program. But gossip can be so much fun and it's juicy, for lack of a better word. So you've got the inside scoop. It's just like when someone cracks a story and you get attention, people are focused on you. And then you get to decide who is in the clique that you get to share it with, and you
Mm-hmm.
make them feel special. So I called it gossip foreplay in my book.
It's perfect.
And you start like this. You say, you promise you won't tell any, or I like this. Have you heard the latest, Kristen?
Oh gosh.
Have you heard that before? It's the
Yeah, oh yeah.
latest.
Oh yeah. The
It's not old.
latest.
It's the latest. It's fresh. Have you
Fresh
heard the
off the
latest?
grapevine.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
yeah. I heard through the grapevine.
Yeah.
And then because you're special, you're like, Kristen, I'm not going to tell anyone else but you.
Yeah, yeah.
And so all of that is exciting. And if you take TMZ, for example, because they crack a lot of
Oh yeah.
stories, they've got people out there digging up, information. You got paparazzi, you got all these places and agencies that do this. And right now, the latest story, and I mean, it's everywhere. Everywhere I turned on YouTube and everything, it's about P. Diddy. Now, if
Mm-hmm.
you stay relevant, and I try to keep Kristen relevant, so um, there's a story, they just searched P. Diddy's homes, 2 homes.
Yep.
And then there's information that 50 Cent has got information on Jay-Z and Beyonce. And man, all of this treasure trove of information's coming in. And I caught myself watching that, wondering who's going to go down next. And I started watching the beef of 50 Cent and Jay-Z. And there's this long history and all of that stuff. So, yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, it really is. There's so much going on. It was that one. I would just see the memes coming through.
Yeah.
and the memes were updating me. I didn't
Kristin,
dive into that one. I know
I
you
really just
you
wanted to
did.
gossip a little bit
I
for the
think you
fun
might
of
be gossiping,
for the
Ron.
fun of
Oh my
our
goodness.
listeners. I'm not that worried about PD. Although, if there is this pedophile ring that we hear about, I hope they all get
Yeah.
busted. That's for sure. But we
Oh
won't get off on
yeah.
that. We'll do that in another, like another episode called "Do You Work with Pedophiles?" Something like that. Anyway,
That's
take over,
spicy.
Kristin. I'm going to shut up.
Oh man, yeah, there's so much to unpack there for another
If you're a
episode.
pedophile, we're coming for you. Go ahead, Kristin.
All right, back to the topic. Proponents of workplace gossip point out that it serves as a way for people to communicate what is unacceptable or discouraged at work. And of course, addressing problems and frustrations directly, candidly, and with solution focused approaches would serve this function in healthier ways. Some gossip can be passive aggressive. And I just want to put in there, this is important. This is not just in the workplace. This is in your personal lives as well. And I think it's important. Say you have a group of friends, and I've witnessed something like this before, not in my friend group, but in someone else's, and they have a group text, and then they will one off and take side conversations, right? So you have like, say, 5 people in a group text. And then when someone in the group text says something, then you have the gossiping in a side text conversation. And, for me, I'm always like, have you addressed this with the person themselves, like directly? Because this ongoing frustration that someone may have with a friend or a family member, it's not going to change unless they know what they're doing wrong. And then if you bring that to their attention, then they continue on, that's on them. But until then, you're complicit.
Yeah, we're going to talk about kicking the gossip habit a little bit, give some
Yeah.
information. But I'll tell you
Drives
something
me
that's
nuts.
interesting. I'd love to get your thoughts on this, Kristin. There's a Facebook group, and I'm sure every city has them. Charleston has one. It's called "Are We Dating the Same Guy?" And
I've never heard of that. That's amazing.
whoever has this controls it. They verify you before you can get in this group, because there's some guys, of course, have tried to raid this group. And because I had a friend that was one of the guys mentioned, but I got this woman to pull it up, and I started reading some of the stuff, and man, and here's what I couldn't help but wonder: do these guys, is there 2 sides to this story? Because there usually is, but it's literally just accusations or stories about this guy or whatever. And then one lady put, "This is my husband. Have any of you dated him? Or do you know anything?"
Oh my goodness.
I thought I would be a
To
little
be a
embarrassed
fly
for
on the
that.
wall.
No kidding.
Oh my
But I guarantee
gosh.
you Portland's got something similar, because I heard that these are all over the United States.
That
Different
is
stories about
amazing.
guys.
I might have to just get in there for some
I think you
intel.
should, because we can get some good stories out of
That's
that.
hilarious. Oh
Yeah,
my
and I was a little
goodness.
disappointed I didn't make it. But
Yeah, I was going to
anyway.
ask you, did you make the list? Probably a good thing. It sounds like it's a place to
Yeah.
post negative experiences. So that's good to know. Oh my gosh. Can you imagine being so insecure in your relationship that you have to post and say, is anyone dating my husband? So clearly there were suspicions there.
Yeah.
Oh goodness.
Kristin, I've been a little hard on myself, but I will tell you that once I realized and started thinking through years and years ago, I decided I'm not gossiping. And I really did cut back on that. I mean, I'm not saying I was perfect, but I realized, and it's a good thing that I did, because when I got promoted, when I became the academy director, things would get back to me, because people love to gossip about the boss. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
That occupies our thoughts and our time. And I had someone that was gossiping about me, and I called them and had them come to my office. And by the way, this was a tough, kind of a tough person, tatted up, taught, in a federal law enforcement arena. And I got to tell you something, Kristin, it was really funny to me, but when I looked them in the eye and leaned across the table and said, "I know what you said, and it better stop." If you could have seen this person, they fell apart. They were so nervous. And I wanted to go, you should at least, have the balls to look me in the eye and tell me. But I thought that was quite amazing. It's interesting when a gossiper gets caught.
Yes.
How they react. All this person had to say was, "I did it. I won't do it anymore. But instead they started to stammer around excuses. I said, just stop,
Wow,
just
the
don't ever do
weakness.
this again. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, you
Now,
exposed that for sure.
yeah, yeah. I did that actually more than once, but that was the
Good
coolest
for
macho.
you.
That was the coolest macho one that I wanted to make myself look good. So let's cut to the chase. So someone who gossips incessantly, they, as you already said, Kristen, they likely have issues.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk a lot about childhood programming on this podcast. And frankly, if you really dissect some of this, you do a deep dive, a lot of these people did not have a parent who maybe went to their games or went to their
Mm.
recitals or whatever they
Yeah.
had. And that insecurity causes them to bring it into the workplace. We've talked about trauma transfer. This is more like an
Yeah.
insecurity transfer.
Right.
So they get in the workplace and they start to share gossip because it gets attention, or they're not popular. So if they can come up with some gossip, it'll help them get in the in crowd. So
Yeah.
all of these dynamics play out in businesses, organizations, and like you said, even in a personal life. It's not like that Apple show that you and I like, Severed. I don't think somebody
Mm.
flips the switch in their brain and they don't gossip in their
Right.
everyday life. You
Yeah.
can guarantee they're doing both. But if you do gossip a lot, just please think it through. And we want to give you a few things that might help you kick the gossip habit. Number
Yeah.
one is be aware that of your own self, of your own issues, and ask yourself, am I projecting my own issues through gossip? Ask yourself another question. Am I doing this to fit in? And ordinarily I wouldn't do this. Ask yourself, what if that person was here? Would I actually say this if they were in the room? So as you begin to do some introspection, which helps us grow in all kinds of areas, we start to realize that maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I'm insecure. Maybe I need to work on some things. Now, before we close, I'm going to give you a few actual steps that you can take if you are someone who gossips. But Kristen, we also need to find out about what if you just entertain gossip a lot? You got anything on that?
Right, right. So, what about when you find yourself on the listening end of gossip? The easiest response is just listen and don't really respond. But due to the false consensus effect, that response is likely to be interpreted as agreement. And if that's not your perspective, sharing your differing experience or opinion may be necessary if it is important to you not to be misunderstood or viewed as complicit in the gossip. It's really important. I've done that a number of times, and it doesn't always make you the most popular person, but you have to do what's right. Another alternative is to have a rehearsed response for such situations. Perhaps something like, I'm sorry, I'm working on not talking about other people when they're not present. And you can say it in a way that, I don't know how to, Ron, I would say it kind of funny, like Valley, like, I'm sorry, I'm working on not talking about people when they're not present. And I'm serious, but I did it in a lighthearted way. And the response from others is generally not going to be like, oh, that was nasty. Or who does she think she is? It's going to be a little more like lighthearted on their end as
I
well.
think another
So,
way you can do it is with a smile to say, gosh, that sounds juicy, but I am really working on myself and I'm trying not to
yeah.
gossip. Like you put it on yourself, you acknowledge that it's good stuff, but there's ways of doing it. I'll tell you a quick story, Kristen, that I thought was so unique. One of the greatest women I've ever known, her name is Shirley Keene, and she worked at a Christian bookstore. Now, this was years ago, and I would swing by there just to get a hug from her because it was like God himself was hugging you. I don't know. She really was. She just
Yeah.
had this dynamic presence. And so she and I were talking and gossip came up and she said, yeah, I realized when you work at a Christian bookstore, everyone comes in. A lot of people want to talk about their pastor or another church.
Wow.
So she said, and she's so sweet, she would never say an ill word about anyone. So she said, what I did is I just started extending my hands and I said, I can tell this person is really on your heart. You pray for them and I'll agree with you.
Oh, that's cute. That's very Southern. I like
They
it.
had to pray they had to pray for that person. So I thought that was so funny.
Oh my
Can you
goodness, I
imagine
love
you want to
it.
gossip about someone, but you end up having to pray for them?
Yeah, I like it. I like her spin. That was awesome.
Yeah, that's good.
So it's important. And I just want to say something. It's like when I have a lot of friends that will complain about what's happening politically, but they don't vote. And it's the same type of thing. You're going to complain about someone's behavior, but by not addressing it or nipping it, you're doing nothing to help the situation. So you are then complicit, right? So I take it a bit further, and I generally will just, if I have an issue, I just nip it. And I definitely don't partake if someone is involved in gossip. And I really do think, I've shared this on prior episodes, I think that caused a rift between me and one of my managers at one point, because they would call me in the office and be talking poorly about somebody, and I would not partake. And then I would bring up whatever business I was working on and get myself out of the office as soon as I could, because I didn't want any part of that. And so I do think that created a divide, but that's okay. That's a divide I'm okay with, because I wasn't willing to really just forego who I was as a person
Yeah.
to have a great relationship with somebody. So and there's ways to keep it professional. You can keep it high level professional and not fall into it.
Yeah, Kristen, I think some takeaways. We always say we are solution minded, and we do want to help you if you are a gossiper, or if you get uncomfortable, but you just don't have the nerve to say what we said earlier, that you're working on yourself, that you don't want to gossip anymore. One of the things I tell people all the time is, whatever you're doing, start small. Maybe leave the room if there's a group, because I remember I had a manager once. He would call everyone in, and then they were the in crowd, and they would gossip about other people on another team.
Yikes.
So I began to realize this is a huge waste of my time, and I would politely just leave the room and get busy. But if you start in small ways, your
Mm-hmm.
confidence will build, your courage will build. And then you can get to the point where you literally just say, and maybe you should nip it at the bud before it starts, to just, if you know someone gossips a lot, you should just say, hey, I want to let you know I'm working on myself. So I'm not going to be
Mm-hmm.
entertaining gossip. As a matter of fact, in the show notes, I put friends, because there was an episode where Rachel is trying to work on not gossiping so much. They called her out on it. And it's funny in many ways, but it's also funny when two people find out that they both knew the gossip. So they were so excited they could finally talk about it. And that was
Yeah.
Joey.
Yeah.
They both had the
Oh
same,
yeah.
they both knew something, and it was a lot of fun. But again, practice, think about how it could hurt someone, it's damaging. And here's a big thing: we always want you to do better in life and your career. If you gossip a lot, you are not going to be respected in the long run. People
Mm-hmm.
are going to wonder if you're gossiping about them. And as we've already said, you are going to create this bias against this person, or maybe even against yourself. So
Right.
just ask yourself, am I insecure? Am I craving attention? And you got to deal with that. You got to deal
Right.
with it.
You do. You do. And I'll just add one last moment. And I think it's important because people can do this on their own. I was in a situation where somebody above me was talking poorly about a previous leader that I worked for and had a great relationship with. And they were speaking of them very poorly. And I said, "What? I love them." And I used their name. And it was interesting because I said it and I wasn't like, I didn't have a frown on my face. I was smiling, like I was really surprised. And then, and it stopped right there, because then I didn't go to that leader who I was defending. I didn't go, "You don't even want to know who was speaking poorly about you." It didn't go anywhere. But I, right then and there, said, "I love that person," and stopped and went back to my desk, and it stopped there. So I think even if you did like stand up for somebody like I did, you then are gossiping if you go and call that person and let them know what happened. Like, that's
You're
so
exactly right.
unnecessary.
It is.
Yeah. So there's so many facets to it.
They don't cut the grapevine for nothing.
Exactly.
I wish we could end on that song. Could you sing it
I
maybe?
know, right? Oh, goodness. No way.
All right, everybody.
Oh.
Have a great week. Be the leader you're meant to be.
We'll see you next week.
The Dirty Side of Leadership podcast is brought to you by Forward Operations. If you'd like to book Ron or Kristin for speaking events, training, or executive coaching, visit forwardoperations.com. Be the leader you're meant to be.